Hey everyone, welcome back to the arena. I'm MD, joined here by Matt, and once again a guest that I can't wait to get into here. But before we start the conversation, want to show love and appreciation to those that continue to follow and show appreciation back.
What's up, guys? Matt back again. We got another good guest here that I'm very excited to have this conversation with. His name is Will Plagakis. It is, for reference, 7:40 p.m. Central Time here in Chicago. It is 10 in the morning, something along those lines, in Australia, where Will is. So we've really stretched our reach of guests here, but we're super excited to have Will on. Will is a psychology grad and working towards his master's in psychology. Is also a bodybuilder and just a general promoter of men's mental health and mental health more generally. But without further ado, Will be able to introduce himself far better than I can. So, Will, why don't you just provide a background of yourself, who is Will, and how you kind of got to where you are today?
Yep. Hey guys. Yeah, as I said, my name's Will. I have studied the Bachelor of Psychology honours at the University of South Australia and was lucky enough to get a first class, but I haven't quite gotten into a master's yet, so I'm working towards that with my volunteering. I love bodybuilding. I love advocating for mental health and everything surrounding this space. I think what these guys are doing is amazing and it takes a lot of courage. Um, I first got into psychology because I grew up with a father who was mentally unwell for, I'd say, yeah, about three quarters of my life. And so that's where interest in everything was stimulated because I would often go to friends' houses growing up and see how their, household was and directly compared it to mine and saw the differences and yeah, I just wanted to, yeah, I guess that just sparked the interest and yeah, here we are now. So, um, yeah,
So, so
I'm
Will,
more,
what were some of those, like, maybe describe some of those differences? You mentioned like going to friends' houses and seeing how things are different. Like, maybe just elaborate on that a little bit.
so, for instance, my dad, he wasn't just mentally unwell. He also suffered from a lot of physical ailments as well. He had this chronic condition called fibromyalgia, which is basically excruciating back pain, and it caused him to be on the couch a lot of the time. And the only thing that would make him feel a little bit better was his bodybuilding. But ultimately, he was only getting 3 hours sleep every night, and so you could imagine with 3 hours sleep, working full time, taking care, like helping take care of kids, taking us to school, helping us with homework and everything. The mood in the house was always very, for a lot of the time, was very somber and depressed. And I remember it had been years since I'd seen him laugh, and the first time that I ever saw him laugh was when we were watching the movie White Chicks. And I distinctly remember it because I just thought it was like so odd to see like laughter come out of him. But then at friends' houses, it was always most of the time anyway, just happy. Everyone's laughing, having a good time. And yeah, so I started to pick up on back then. Oh, there's something not quite right here. But obviously, I was very young, so I didn't have the understanding. But that's yeah, what sparked the interest later on. Yeah.
What's your relationship like at that time with your father? Because are you more drawn to stay at your friend's house and avoid the whole situation, or does that bring you closer to your father and more curious in some regard?
Oh no, I was always very close with my dad. Yeah. It was a very odd dynamic because um, yeah, I was very close. It made me feel more sorry for him, and yeah, I wanted to help wherever I could. But obviously, being so young, I didn't really know what to do. Like because this was in primary school, I'm speaking about right now, and then in high school, he started to improve for a while, but then it went back down again. But yeah, no, I was always pretty close with my dad. We did bicker like quite a bit as father sons do, but it like ultimately it was just love there. We never went to bed on an argument, even if he was having an outburst or something. Like we always, forgave each other very quickly, and it was good. Mm.
So at what point do you undertake a passion for or an interest in mental health or psychology and decide that this is what you want to study and get into?
In about year 10, or year 11, when I saw that, well, actually, if I backtrack a little bit, it was my parents were first going to separate in year 9. So that's when I really started to look, like, Google up things and understand why people split up. And because we come from a European background, my mum was born in England and my dad is from like Greece, and so we, like, family has always been instilled from both my parents is like my number one value from like birth. So when I saw that was going to separate, I didn't understand why, because I couldn't understand the contradiction with that, and so that's what stimulated my need to study psychology, but also because of my dad's lack of sleep. Like, the lack of sleep did the most damage ever. Like, we had to be so quiet, like, growing up. He had to, like, there were so many rules in the house. Like, we couldn't have showers after, like, 8 p.m. or couldn't go in the kitchen after a certain time because because otherwise it would, like, wake him up or whatever, because he would sleep very sporadically because of the pain. And a lot of friends found it very odd coming over, because even a couple of my friends went to bed a couple times because they were just, because my dad was like, he was really nice, but everyone called him a friendly giant. But I'll send some photos after, but he was like 6'4", weighed 120 kilos, had 19-inch arms. He was a very big guy. So to a kid, it's very scary. But when you've been said, like, oh, you've got to be quiet, don't wake, like my mum would say, don't wake Steve up. So people would come over and they'd be too scared to go to the bathroom. So growing up with all that stuff it was very weird. And then I went to friends' houses and would see, oh, this is just, after a long time, I found it was abnormal. And that's what I started to think, why is he this way? Like, what is it about him that has, like, led him to be like this? So yeah.
Would you say, Will, were you were you a happy person then growing up, when you're in a household where nobody, well, your dad specifically, is never smiling? Like, how would you describe yourself? Like, how did that impact you, if at all?
Luckily I had my mother, and she was the kind of opposite of dad, in that she would always be there for us and would be overly joyful, and she protected us from from knowing about him a lot of the time. So because of her, I was grateful enough I still look back at my childhood and think it was good, and I was happy because of everything she did and provided for us at the same time. She was a very good mum and dealt with the mental health side of things better than anyone I know that could have, and always very supportive. And because of that, my friends always used to call me like the energetic one, like the really happy one. So I was still happy. I think I was just lucky enough to be blessed with a happy temperament from birth as well. I've always kind of been a glass half full guy, I guess you'd say. Yeah.
So at what point do you pick up bodybuilding and a passion for the physical side now and physical fitness? I believe you and your father shared that passion. Was that part of maybe how you kind of formed a relationship and a bond with him? Did you pick it up because of him?
Because of him, yeah. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. So from birth, we've had a gym in our house. Luckily enough, like, Dad just wanted to have a gym there. So I watched him train from even before 1 years of age. I've been watching him train, and just seeing this, like, behemoth of a man. He looked like a superhero to me, like, growing up, when I used to see him get pumps and stuff. So I just became almost obsessed with, like, oh, I want to be big and strong too. But he didn't let me start lifting weights till later in high school. But that was where we got our bonding time, for sure. That was what we bonded over. We had a rule in the gym room, and it was that you can't talk about any nonsense in there. Like, there's no negative talk. And so when I go in there now, it's mostly happy, just happy memories that I get back of him, and it's been really helpful for my grieving process. And I will say, like, this might be a bit sensitive, but he his life in the gym room, which is like ironic because it was his favorite passion and everything. But on the it's been really good and helpful
So,
for my
Will,
grief.
did you say you kind of cut out there? Did you say is that? And I hate. I
What,
mean,
what was sensitive? You said something was sensitive, and you
Oh,
kind of cut out there.
I was saying, might have been sensitive because he actually took his life in the gym room. Um, but through my grieving process, I have still looked at that room as like the happy place that I had with him. It's really weird, because like the majority of my memories of him being happy were in there, and that's what's kind of led me to continue bodybuilding and everything like that. Yeah, because in his he left like a note for us, and he was saying, you know, don't give up on it and stuff. So I try to, yeah, know that that was the thing that helped him while he was alive. I honestly believe that if he didn't have his physical exercise, he wouldn't have lasted as long as he did, and he probably would have done it a lot sooner because this was what was keeping him sane for I think the last 10 years. And yeah, so I go in there and it's just a reminder of like, you know, I'm very privileged to be able to have had these times with him, and the memories that I do have with him that come in randomly, I'm so grateful for because it's like almost keeping him alive in my head kind of way, that I don't get in any other external environment. So yeah, it's really good.
So there's, first of all, I mean, that's, you know, I appreciate you being vulnerable and opening up about that. I think about how we have different identity and different attachment or associations with different parts of our lives, be it our hometown. And when we see things from our hometown, we associate that as a part of our identity. As you've become a bodybuilder, it sounds like the gym room, going into a gym, your association with it changed after that had happened. Can you describe what a gym is to you now, you know, after that situation had happened? What is your relationship with the gym?
So at the beginning, when it first happened, I did what most people do, and I go into denial, and I couldn't really fathom what he had done. Um, but I was finding that when I was going into any gym, because we also trained at the same gym as well, and I found that, yeah, when I would go there, I'd get like bombarded with thoughts on the topic. And I told my psychologist, I went to go see a psychologist as well, which I would recommend everyone do when something like this happens because they're very helpful. But he was telling me, you know, rather than denying, you should pick an environment where you could talk to him in your head, because when you know someone so deeply, you can have like a conversation in their head and you kind of know what they're going to say, if that makes sense. And so if the gym room was or any gym was like the easiest place for me to do that, because that's just what I associated my dad with. So yeah, that's what helped me with my grieving process so much was just going to training. So to answer your question, what's the gym room now? Well, it's been a vehicle to help me, you know, go through. Like, I'm definitely not finished with my grieving, but it's been, I guess, a vehicle to help me very much with doing that. Yeah.
can you just well, I really appreciate the level of vulnerability to especially when you're still in the grieving stage. I mean, it means a lot to us, and I guess, can you maybe just talk about the grieving process a little bit, like what it looks like for you? I'm not very familiar with just like the different steps of the process, and I'd love for you to maybe just talk a little bit about your journey with it and kind of how you kind of got to wherever you're at today with it.
Yeah, for sure. So on the internet and in textbooks, they kind of lay it out with like you go through the steps and you start at denial and you end at healing or whatever. But it's not, well, from my experience and a lot of other people's experience that I've looked up online, it doesn't really quite work that way. Um, it's more of like a cycle. You might go to the next step and then cycle back and then to the next step and cycle back. So what has happened for me is grieving is it's very, very similar to depression. It's not quite categorized as depression, but it's very similar in that you spend a lot of time ruminating, like a lot of time ruminating. And, at the beginning, depression, all of it, from a biological standpoint, it's actually helpful for us. It's adaptive. It's not maladaptive at the beginning. That's why nature has designed us to feel all of these emotions and have these neurochemical processes that occur during grieving. But what happens is when you spend so much time ruminating, you begin to not be able to handle the rumination. So you can go through denial and you can go through all these other phases, or start taking exogenous medication or substances or self-medicating or things like that, and then you stop your grieving process. And so what I did at the beginning, when I first found this out, because when you lose someone to suicide, it's very different to losing someone in a different way, because you get this thing called complex grief, and it's because you struggle to rationalize it in your brain of like the why, because you always think, with more time heals everything, they say, or whatever. So you start to think a little bit along those lines. But yeah, coming back to the grieving part. So because of the complexity of the grief, you might want to just quit it or exit it, start drinking, going for beers, partying, whatever it is people do. I didn't want to do any of that because I looked up on the internet. I was spending so much time on PubMed reading through all the literature, and I looked at the statistics of, the cohort of people that have experienced a suicide in like their direct family in comparison to those who haven't. And the ones that had them in the direct family, their outcomes were very poor a lot of the time, but there was a subset in those cohorts that grieved extremely well and came out stronger. And I was like, well, I'm choosing, to stay alive. Like that's a choice every day you have. Like you have a choice to stay alive. That's how I see it. And if I'm choosing to be here, well, I don't want to prolong my suffering for as long as possible. So I want to do this the right way. I want to face it head on. And so I started to look at all the literature and what the science says about grieving properly and everything. So I started to do that, and I actually let myself ruminate. I actually embraced it, because when you ruminate a lot, your subconscious mind starts to work, and I'll just, without going into too much depth, it works in a way that you start to solve problems at the back of your head without realizing it. And usually what happens is there's this thing called the REM sleep hypothesis. And when you've been ruminating for a long time about this, and this is for anything in your day, like it doesn't matter if it's grieving or anything, when you think about something for long enough, during REM sleep, it's the only time in the entire day where your body doesn't release the stress neurochemical adenosine. So you can kind of recontextualize things during that REM sleep, and then it helps you come to a better understanding with all the resources and learning material that you've had throughout your life, so you can kind of process it better for yourself. So it's kind of like having your own inbuilt therapist, if that makes sense, in a way, if you do it properly. And so I was trying to think, all right, I want to make sure that I get this. And this wasn't straight away, by the way. This was like a year after, because the first year was really rough. Like I was avoiding it. I used training as an idol. I would just train twice a day. Got so many injuries from doing that. I was running.
How long has it been? Sorry, Will, but
just about a year and a half now.
Okay.
Yeah. and so, or over a year and a half, about a year and 8 months, and so for the last 8 months, I was working with my psychologist, and I was letting myself think about it, doing all these things, and I found, and I have been finding that I've been having more dreams about it. Dreams over time have been helping because I've been able to better my understanding as to, and it sounds like this will sound really weird, but because you can kind of picture a million different verticals of life paths that someone could have gone down. You could picture that all day, but that's not going to really do anything for you because you don't fundamentally know where they're going to go meet someone new. Like I used to think, oh, what if he met another woman? What if he made some new friends? What if he did this, that? Like, what if, the what ifs, you could go forever, but that's really unhealthy because it wasn't there. So once you can get past that and accept reality for what it is, you allow yourself to think about it, then you dream about it, and then you come to an acceptance and you kind of realize that under no circumstance have been okay for him to stay with what he went through, because he went through like so much stuff, like it's insane. And you come to this realization that you don't view mental health as like when you get to this point, I believe anyway, you won't view it as something that was fixable. It's like a cancer. Like you wouldn't blame someone for dying from cancer, just like how I wouldn't blame him and I have never blamed him for doing this, because over time, the neurochemical structure in your brain changes and you start to think and you become a completely different person because you're always acting with high cortisol and all this stuff. So you come to this acceptance that it's not their fault. So you don't have the anger in the grieving stage. You don't have denial anymore because it has happened. And then you start to work towards peace and acceptance because you understand that they are at peace and you can have acceptance because they are at peace. And that's kind of what I'm trying to work towards now. So
yeah, Will, I mean, thank you for the response. What did how did a psychologist, and is that like, enlighten me a little bit, is that like traditional talk therapy for the most part, and if so, just like what did that do for you, because you're a psychology major, so presumably you know a lot of this stuff, but how did you had mentioned that if it was up to you, in your eyes, everyone should go. And I feel very similar about talk therapy, and I think everyone can benefit. Maybe everyone doesn't quote unquote need it, but I do think everyone can benefit from it in some ways. So maybe just talk about your experience with therapy, with your psychologist, and what it's done for you.
yeah, for sure. So at the beginning, like I said, because it's like a very complex situation. There wasn't just one factor that led him to do what he did. There was many, and they built up over time. So for a lot of the beginning of the sessions, it was talking about all of that stuff, which I would recommend people do, like go into as much detail as possible, because the more context a psychologist has, the more, I guess you'd say, equipment they have to work with. And so it was talk therapy, as you would say at the beginning. But then we moved into this other things because there were a lot of traumatic memories throughout the last year. Like my whole life, I had never seen him, like regardless of how much he had going on, he always kept pushing through. So with his 3 hours sleep for 15 years, which still train for 2 hours a day, help us with our homework, cook our food, take us to school, like helping with mum, like they both did it like equally. And do everything he'll do everything for us. And I've just seen him as this absolute tank. And then he said to me one day, he's like, oh, this is the first time you're going to see your dad fall. And so I was like, I was thinking in that point, like I was filled with a lot of worry. And so I have this trauma, I had traumatic memories of times where it would be like 1 a.m. or something, and he would have collapsed and be shaking, and I'd have to, he was a heavy guy, like I said, and I'd have to pick him up, put him on the couch, calm him down, like, and a bunch of other memories as well, which I won't really go into. But we use because those used to come into my head and like had a kind of imprint in my brain for a long time, it was kind of like if you like with video editing software, to put it into an analogy, you know how you have like you can put an overlay on something, so you're experiencing your life, but the overlay in the back of my head after you'd done it was just these traumatic kind of memories that I would have that would just kind of be there constantly throughout the day. So it was very hard to just function basically. And but we did this therapy called EMDR, and it basically mimics REM sleep but in real life. And he'll do a bunch of exercises and he'll do like this, and you're supposed to, it's not hypnosis or anything like that, but he'll do this and you'll kind of talk about the memory, and basically after a long time you'll realize that you've put up a lot of barriers into letting yourself heal from those memories. And it because of the distraction of your eyes going like this while he's using specific principles to talk and everything, it helps with the healing. And then now when I think of those memories, they're not traumatic at all. I can say with 100% confidence that it worked for me. And yeah, and you just come close to acceptance. So in a broad overview of my psychology therapy experience, we didn't just use
and why do you think everyone should go, or why do you think everyone could benefit from it?
Yeah, I think everyone could benefit from it because there's over 500 different types of therapies, and that's a lot. A lot of them are similar, but at the beginning it's hard. A lot of people might give up at the beginning because they don't notice results straight away. Like I didn't notice results, but it took us a long time to get to that EMDR thing, which worked for me personally. If you stay with it, your therapist will find something that's going to work for you. And I just think if you have at your disposal, the means to go see a therapist, and you don't want to live, your life suffering, and you want to, go back to having the most quality life possible, therapy is going to help with that. And, I think building resilience best asset you can ever invest in your entire life for many reasons. But ultimately, psychology is going to help you take whatever trauma you've had and help you to take it as a lesson, and then use that to build resilience, which you can use as a resource for things later in life. Since my dad has passed, a lot of other things in life have gone pear-shaped, but because I've built the resilience with these other things, like they don't phase me, like nothing, like it doesn't phase. I'm not saying that I'm like so strong or anything, like don't get me wrong, I definitely have my down days still and everything like that, but to the extent that it would have phased me before, it doesn't. And I think with psychology, it just helps you understand that you can either choose to be a person that has a fixed mindset, where you're thinking, okay, so I've had this event happen to me, this is going to define the rest of my life. It can take you down a bad rabbit hole, or you can go see a psychologist and switch your mindset to a growth mindset and understand that, whilst I can't control everything that happens to me, I can control how I react afterwards, and ultimately that's going to have a big impact on the rest of my quality of life. And that's why I think psychology is very, very good for people to go and see.
In your Insta bio, it says you're exploring the depth of human potential and unbreakable resilience. There's two parts there. The depth of human potential, exploring it. What does that mean?
So before my dad did it, in my honors year, like the year leading up to it, and long story short, a lot of events preceded him doing that. And so on the honors year of psychology, it's like notoriously known as like one of the hardest years, especially if you're undergraduate. Like if you're studying and you have physical exercise and you have to work, there's not really much time left for socializing, because to get into masters it's so competitive. And I had passed the census date because I had originally told my dad that I said at the start, like, I'm going to take the year off so I can look after you, because I saw his life going downhill. But he said, like, he was a very stubborn, proud man, very loving, but very stubborn. And he said, no, you're not doing that. So the census date had passed, right? And you work through all these years to get the grades. And at the beginning, there's 500 students, then there's only 50 in honors, which I was in that year. And then they only do 6 into masters. And ultimately, the goal is to become a clinical psychologist, which you need a master's for. But to do that, you kind of need to get like straight HDs. And my grades were not up to scratch. They were like going bad. Nothing was summative yet, but I wasn't able to concentrate because my at the beginning of that year, that's when my parents split up. And then my best friend from primary school's dad passed away a few months after. Then my mum was diagnosed with thyroid cancer, and then my dad took his life. And that was all in a very, very short time period of like 8 months. And so I was pushed into a corner, and I couldn't stop psychology because otherwise I would have gotten a fail. But I didn't want to let my dream go either. And I also had to help my dad. So I thought, what do I do? And so I started to just indulge in looking at all of these videos and documentaries of these people from Syria and Sudan and all these people in Somalia and the hardships that they go through. And this wouldn't work for everyone, but for me, because everything they say in psychology is relative, so for someone to get an anxiety, 10 out of 10 anxiety response, what might be something triggering for one person will only be a 1 for someone else, or something like that. I wanted to try to shift my point of relativity, so I was just exposing myself to these videos of these people that, like this dude, I can't remember what his name was, but he's watched his mum be, like, he was tied up and he watched his mum be molested by a police officer they had called because they were robbing their house. And this guy, 20 years later, has said that, you know, he was lucky enough to have a family, and, you know, he just kept going and had this, you know, like, he obviously has so much trauma, but this growth mindset. I thought, well, genetically, we're all 99 point whatever percent the same. So if it's possible for him, it's possible for me to get through this. And that's what I've kind of used from there all the way passing dad and everything that's happened. So I've been indulging in all of that and seeing, like, well, what is so special about what these people do that help them get through something that is that severe that they can then go on to still live good lives. Because it's just, when it first happened and dad first did it, I went onto YouTube straight away and I started to look at, like, what are other people's experiences with it and things like that, but no one was really talking about the in-depth level of what happens. But these documentaries were talking about them or these random videos that I would find or stumble across would talk about everything in depth. And it was nice to hear someone talking about something that was more severe than mine and then still see them come out on the other side. So that's where, like, the potential comes in, because, like, you have, like, when you're pushed in your gene expression somewhere, you're going to have so much potential that you don't even realize that just comes out. And it's just, he was basically explaining it like, you're the person that, like, and he's not a psychologist, he's just someone that has gone through. He was basically saying you're your own worst enemy, and you're going to be the person that stops yourself from improving or not. And that's why I think, yeah, like, I would call that unbreakable resilience, to have watched something like that of your parent go through and then be murdered and then still live after that and have your own family without, you know, resorting to drugs, alcohol, or anything like that. I feel like, yeah, it was very powerful for me to see. And I know that sounds very, very extreme, and it's definitely not what a psychologist would recommend someone to go and do, but that's just what helped for me. I think I'm a bit of an...
Yeah, so there's a relativity component, you know, there's a relativity component being... And I'm sure you're exposed to people that complain about things that, relatively speaking, are not even on your scale, given what you've been through in your life. And how do you respond in a way that's productive to somebody who complains to you, maybe even about something that you would deem so minuscule? How do you balance being an empathetic friend with also helping maybe shed some perspective on this person that, things could always be a little bit worse.
Yeah, so because when I speak to friends and stuff with what they're going through, I don't look at it. I never do comparison. Like I know I was comparing my situation to the people on the other side of the world, but I don't actually compare in real life. I am definitely able to empathize with people because I truly understand that everything's relative. So I haven't experienced what I have experienced. So, of course, they're going to be stressed over this, and I understand that. So, I'm here for them as best I can, and I love them as best that I just love them like I normally would. Like, I don't look afterwards and say, oh, you should just grow up. Like, I don't think in my head, like, oh, this is nothing. You shouldn't be getting affected by this. It's more like I still feel so bad because I can see that they're hurting in that way. But at the same time, I also know like all these things that we go through, like you can kind of look at them as like investments in a way because your body starts to degenerate after 35 or whatever it is quite fast. And after 35, that's where you're statistically going to be exposed to people around you getting cancer, into your 50s, 60s or whatever. So you'll vicariously experience cancer. You might experience it yourself. You're going to experience loss of things, loss of maybe like job changes, lots of life things happening. And so if you go through your whole first part of your life, haven't experienced anything, and then it just all starts to hit there, well, if you're stubborn and you're not going to see a psychologist or something, you're probably going to struggle. But if you've gone through like little things over your life that you're going through, it's like, it's going to be an investment for later on. And, you're going to be a lot better off. So when they're going through these things, I'll try to help as best as I can. And then, I'll also say how it's as bad as it seems now, you will be grateful for it afterwards. I'm not grateful my dad did what he did, but I'm grateful that I was able, with the help of someone else, to be able to look at it in a way that I can take the lessons out of it and then know that it's going to protect me moving forward in life. So nothing always needs to seem all bad, but maybe that's my biased opinion. But yeah, that's just how I choose to look at it, because I can't see another way without it just ending in misery. So, and that's for everything.
I mean, I think about that. Like I heard the term like voluntary suffering, and I feel like that's kind of what you're talking about. And I mean, I can relate to it for my personal life. Like when it came to like my sexuality, that was something that I was like refused to accept for a long time, and a place of shame and all that. And like now I really am, and it's totally different than what you've experienced, but it was difficult nonetheless. And I'm grateful for all of it, really, because I felt like through that, and then through getting therapy, like I've built up the tools when I do eventually experience loss or whatever it might be that comes later on in life. Because outside of that, like I've got nothing to complain about, or I never did. Like my life, I was very privileged in growing up, and where I grew up and how I grew up, and the friends and the family and the support that I've always had. So I think, and I could have just kind of pushed that along and never addressed that part of me, and that would have obviously made things even worse. But I can totally relate. Like there's a lot of tools and a lot of things I've learned about myself that I think have better equipped me to deal with things that are going to happen regardless. So I think suffering is extremely important, because stuff's going to get thrown at you in life that you ultimately have no control over at some point.
Yeah, and that what you went through sounds so hard, because that's with your identity. Like that's a really hard one as well, when it comes to identity. So that's awesome that you've been able to. Yeah, that's really awesome that you've been able to, get through that. I think that will serve you so well. Yeah.
So what about for those that, like you said, who aren't going through anything that require them to be resilient, or to see a psychologist and build what you've built for yourself? I know you talk about self-care on your page, and you also talk about developing resilience. Do you know how someone in it? Because I just think it's so important that why wait for some
Yeah.
terrible event to happen to start to develop that resilience. So how do we preemptively teach men in particular, or anyone really, to develop resilience prior to a tragic
Yeah,
event?
that's a really good question. I actually have never thought about that before because, I remember in first year psychology, they got us to watch this video of a family that experienced suicide. And back then, I used to think, I am so grateful that I do not come from a home that has to go through this hardship. That looks just awful and so sad. And so I never thought about doing anything before that. And then got thrown in the deep end. So I can only kind of speak about the things that have worked that I would just be doing back then if I had known that this was coming. And it can be things as like little. It's just really strengthening your mind every day. Like you can start with something as small as like, so I don't like to start my day without having a cold shower for 3 minutes. Like as bad like the chemical process in your brain that you're going to experience from having just that cold shower is like proven to increase your resilience a lot because if yeah, like you can look into it, but it's very good. So, having a cold shower. This is like assuming nothing bad is going on in your life. So having a cold shower. Um, but then I would say mostly it's just gaining perspective on life. So you don't have to like you have to experience it yourself, but if you're aware that other people can go through certain things and you do your research or you have friends that go through things and you're you're empathetically there for them, or you can have the empathy to see what these people are going through on the internet, whatever it is, like, and I don't just mean from the other side of the world. It could just be in your hometown or just other people that are going through whatever it is, it's small, big or large. Like just have a very diverse understanding on humans and what they go through. And when you're not going through anything, just be come from a place of gratefulness that you don't have to go through any of that at the moment. Because I haven't had long peace like stints of this, but I have had like a week. I remember the first almost 4 days where I had complete peace, and I was so grateful to feel that again. And so when you are being able to feel that and have that, just be grateful, because it might not, and I do not mean to sound pessimistic here or anything, but it might not always be that way. But at least you know that you can experience that and you can come back to it. But if you have a perspective and understand that other people can feel different and that your life circumstances could change, it's not to like preempt negativity. I'm not advocating for that at all, but it's kind of just to, yeah, just be grateful when you have it. And then also know, because you've seen so many other people go through things then come to the other side, that when you experience like something bad, if it eventually does come, that you will also have the capabilities to get through it yourself, and you don't need to give up. It not that it won't be hard and that you're going to feel like giving up, because, and for me as well, like so many times I wanted to and stuff, it is very hard, but you will like find these things in you that you never thought you had, and this part of yourself that you never knew was so strong, and it will come out. Like that's how we're designed. We're designed to survive and reproduce, and your body is so amazing at doing that. But above everything else, I would say your diet. Your diet is the most important part. 90% of your serotonin comes from your gut, and because of what I experienced, I was just eating your normal bodybuilding diet for a long time, like chicken, broccoli, whatever, and um, with the cortisol and the stress and stuff, it wasn't enough nutrients to sustain my gut health, and my gut health turned bad. And I'm actually got a couple autoimmune things right now that I've been fighting, and I'm getting like slightly better with now because I've gone to see a naturopath. But your gut health is like the most important thing, because if your gut health is bad, your serotonin's out of whack, and then that makes your cortisol go up. You're going to have brain fog. When you have brain fog, you're not going to be able to think properly. Um, Nothing's going to work in your head. You're going to feel flat all the time. Like you should be like, for up until like 40 to 50, like everyone should, like what we were designed. That's why they say in the 50s and male testosterone has dropped and everything. It's like you should be feeling like a lot of the time that your vibe is very high. Like it shouldn't be brain fogged and down and stuff. And most of the time that's your diet, and there's no one diet. Like some people react different to some people enjoy, my girlfriend was vegan for 8 years. I tried being a vegan. It made my brain fog worse. It depends on what your gut microbiome is, but if there are all these tests that you can go and do, which I think are the best investment you'll ever do. You just go see a naturopath and you ask for the test for yourself. Like they'll do a stool test and all these other tests to test your gut, what foods you're allergic to. Like, I didn't know this, but I'd eat so much tuna and I had a slight allergy. Like I had not an allergy, but I have reactions to tuna and things with high histamine. So when I cut those foods out, like over this year as well, that's what's helped me be able to think more clearly, process things better, and then get through things. So I'd say, yeah, to answer your question for resilience, one of the best things is getting on top of your diet and eating things that have low inflammation. Obviously indulge like on the weekend or whatever for a special treat, but for your staple foods and stuff, try to optimize it for longevity. Because if you do that, then your brain fog and everything's going to be zero. You're going to have so much energy, vitality, and then that's going to increase your mood and help you get through those tough things.
Yeah, I mean, so to have a good diet, to be in the gym working out, to be practicing gratitude, I think all of these require discipline.
And see a therapist. If everything, because I think...
Yeah, sorry.
No, I only say that because if you're talking about someone that's never experienced any hardship, like, I don't think that's true for the majority of people. I think, it's relative, and I think most people do. And some just might not admit it or even know they're going through it. And so that's why I think going to therapy for people like that can even be more helpful, because they can help peel back the onion and understand. I think a therapist could talk to those people and realize that maybe they're not living to their fullest potential. I think, again, like there's so many people that don't even realize that they might not be living their best life. And I think a therapist can help with that, especially for those people. Anyway, go ahead.
So, I mean...
Yeah, I agree 100%. Like, therapists would be... goes without saying. Yeah,
and I just from a self-care perspective, while you're going through a grieving process, there's a common theme or trend that we notice, that there's an interlink between our physical and our mental health. The better that we keep up with one, helps us keep up with the other. You mentioned you were going to the gym more during your grieving process, but did you ever feel, and you also mentioned you didn't really struggle with depression as much as you were just the grieving process. Did you feel your discipline falter at all? Or, did you find that it was pretty easy to stay disciplined with what you were eating and getting into the gym and getting a workout?
That's a really good question.
Can I try to answer that for you? Because I think you had mentioned at one point, which I think, if anything, I struggle with this the most. Like, I like to think of myself as a disciplined person, and for me, discipline is not overtraining, is listening to my body when it needs rest. And it sounds like you may have struggled with it from that standpoint, because I think I remember you saying that, like, you were overtraining, going twice a day, and then injuring yourself.
Yep, that's 100% right. I did fault with that. You're 100% right. I used it as a coping mechanism. 100%. I thought I was in the mind frame of, which you should never do, but comparing, I'm like, oh, well, other people use physical ailments and stuff. This is better than that. I'm just using physical exercise rather than, drinking beers and stuff. But it still has a negative impact on your body because of the cortisol and everything. And I actually think that's what has caused a lot of my autoimmune stuff, because I was just overexerting myself. So, I would say that at the beginning, like I said, that's why, like, with everything I'm saying, like, this is like the aftermath. Like, when I was going through it, it was a big mess, and I just want to, like, make sure everyone understands, like, I'm not some, I don't know, tank or something that just was fine the whole way through. No, like, training twice a day, like, to someone that doesn't train might sound like, oh, you had a lot of discipline, but like what you said, it wasn't discipline. It was quite the opposite, and that's why I did do it, because I wasn't listening to my body. And so I think you nailed that one on the head, 100%.
What is your what's your purpose now, Will? Do you feel like you have one, and if so, what is it?
To just help as like people in general, but more geared towards men because, like I said, with dad, he he was a very old school kind of guy. Didn't speak about his emotions a whole lot. So I just want people to know like you can speak and you can still be, it doesn't mean you're like, because I don't know, there's this whole stigma thing with like, oh, especially with all the Andrew Tate videos and stuff going out there for young men saying that it's more feminine if you speak about emotions and depression isn't real. And I think it's quite nonsense because I've seen it firsthand that it is real and what the result of it can lead to. So I kind of want to reduce that stigma and say that, hey, no, it's okay to speak about your emotions. Like you don't have to speak to the world about it, but it's fine to speak to your mates or go see someone or anything like that to hopefully reduce the likelihood of them doing what my dad did, so no one has to go through that. But also through that time, my purpose when I become a clinical psychologist one day would be I want to focus in suicide prevention because I want to be able to hopefully equip as many people as I can with enough coping mechanisms so they don't have to resort to the last one, because all the studies have shown that suicide in of itself is actually a coping mechanism. So there's like the stigma of when someone says, oh, I feel like killing myself or I feel like this. A lot of people just label that as, oh, they're just doing that for attention or this or that. But 90% of the time, don't quote me on 90, but a lot of the time, it's not actually that. It's them, if they could translate it with normal language without emotion, they'd be saying, hey, I'm at my wit's end here. I don't have anything else in my basket that I can pull out to help me get out of this. I need help. Like, what do I do? And it's actually a warning sign. So I want to help people have enough coping mechanisms that hopefully they don't have to get to that last one and just pull the trigger or pull the thing and just be done with it. Because the effect it has on families, friends, and loved ones afterwards is just devastating. And it's better for everyone if everyone stays alive, happy and healthy. But obviously, that's not realistic to think that you could do that for everyone. But that would be my purpose. Yeah.
The way you describe your father, it seemed like he was rather stoic. Just curious, did you grow up with an initial perception of mental health and some of those stigmas that you had just mentioned, and then did you take a little bit of a 180 at some point? Or just how is your perception of mental health? Yeah, did it change?
Yeah, definitely. Well, because like I said to you, I stopped studying psychology for a little while. I didn't know if I wanted to. I didn't know. I just thought, because also with the group of friends I had back then, very different to what I had now. Like they also didn't really believe in mental health or whatever, and they just would kind of say, like, they'd say it's for pussies or whatever. Like, you don't need no one struggles. And even though I saw my dad going through what he was going through, I just saw him just getting on with it, and I just kind of assumed that's what you do. But then as things started to get worse, that's when I thought maybe not, and then I started to listen to mum more, speak to the women in my life, and then speak to other men and realize that, hang on a second, this isn't actually normal. Like, a lot of men actually speak about their emotions. It's just that no one really speaks about it. Well, back then anyway, like this was years ago, like publicly. And that's why I think what you guys are doing is so awesome, because it's pushing that movement and showing that it's good. It's not only good, but it's awesome for men to talk about it, because ultimately it helps you and everyone else around you. So I had a 180, and I'm so grateful that I did. And 100%.
Yeah, no, to what you just said, like, I think it can be therapeutic, especially for me. Like, when I get to tell my story now, like, it is very therapeutic, and at the same, so it's helping me, and at the same time, if that can therefore make someone else feel that they're okay to share whatever it is that's on their mind, or go to a friend, or go to a family member, or go to a therapist, whomever it might be, like, that's the least that us three and everyone that can be a little bit vulnerable, that's the least we can do. Because like I said, there are benefits to both sides, at least for me. Like it is therapeutic for me, and if it can help someone else along the way, like I don't see why not.
Yeah,
Um,
100%.
Hey, Will, we're gonna wrap up. Did you have anything else you wanted to cover? All right, Will, we're gonna wrap up here with three rapid
Yep.
fire questions. Before we do, just I wanted to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for just being so open here on the show and sharing your story. We've had other guests come on and talk about having suicidal thoughts, and it completely opened my eyes. I obviously I can't relate to it, and the way they described it just made it seem very real. And so we just really appreciate the vulnerability and coming on here.
No, thank
Three
you guys for
rapid,
having me. I
yeah,
appreciate it.
of course, three rapid fire questions for you. First question: what's the best piece of advice that you've ever received, or just like a favorite quote that you have?
Um, all things are possible through Christ.
I like it. Okay, number two. If you could have dinner with anyone in the world, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Oh, my dad for sure. And so yeah, so I could, because you never know when the last time you're gonna see someone is, and I never thanked him for everything that he like properly thanked him. Like you'd say little thank yous, but I never got to thank him for anything. And I said this in the last podcast as well. You know, if there was a crystal ball and I could see that I'm going to get into life with this father, I would still choose that, even knowing the outcome, because everything he did for us, like I haven't really talked about all of that, but everything he did for us, he was a great, great, great father, and I'm just so grateful that I got to have him and the lessons he taught me and stuff. I just wish I got to thank him properly, and that's what I'll do on that dinner. So yeah.
And thank you for sharing that. Lastly, what do you like to do in your free time? Hobbies, that kind of thing.
Um, read and train, yeah, and spend time with my
Well,
girlfriend. Yeah,
all right. Hey, Will, thanks again so much. We're going to log off here, guys. Thank you all for listening.
thanks.